Maureen here from the VPP. Let's talk about boundary setting and communication. This is a disclaimer that some of what we talk about today could be triggering for some of you. It could provoke strong emotions, reactions, and realizations to your current way of thinking. If you are feeling triggered, it's okay. There's help available. At the end of this presentation, we will have a list of resources that can support you with boundary setting and communication in our community. If you're feeling triggered, take time to step away, protect your mental health. Reach out to someone who you can talk to. Before we get too far today, let's define what a boundary is. A boundary is really just a limit set between you and another person that defines what you're comfortable with and how you expect to be treated. Although we talk a lot about boundaries in the context of relationships, it's really mostly about the relationship you have with yourself and honoring your own feelings, values, needs, and wants. So why do we need boundaries? Every single relationship that we form needs boundaries, whether that's with our friends and family or with intimate partner dating relationships. Firstly, they allow you to be your authentic self, to have your own feelings, needs, and opinions without worrying about pleasing others. Secondly, they set realistic expectations. By clearly defining your boundaries, you let other people know what's expected of them. Thirdly, boundaries create safety. They keep away things that feel uncomfortable or hurtful. And lastly, they're a form of self-care. They allow you to know that you are not responsible for the feelings or behaviors of others and allow you to say no to things that don't align with your priorities or values. When it comes to setting boundaries, there are three main boundary types that we see. The first are rigid boundaries, which are important when we're ensuring our physical safety. But this is kind of like having a brick wall built up around yourself. Sure, you're safe, but you don't let anything else in either. The second are porous or loose boundaries, and these can kind of be like not having any boundaries at all. People with porous boundaries often overshare or become over-involved in other people's situations. They often have a difficult time saying no. The third are healthy boundaries, and this is kind of like having a wooden fence around your yard. You're open to the thoughts, opinions, and ideas of others, but you only compromise if it benefits both parties. Personal boundaries make good relationships just like fences make good neighbors. You may have heard this quote before. What it means really is that boundaries are like invisible fences that show us where our responsibility for us starts and our responsibility for others ends. By setting boundaries in our personal relationships, we build fences that support us in keeping ourselves safe. While the types of personal boundaries you can set for yourself are practically endless, this is a short list that we felt were especially important to talk about. The first are physical boundaries. This refers to your body, your privacy, and your personal space. Knowing what makes you comfortable or uncomfortable is essential, and it's worth sharing it with those around you. The second are emotional boundaries, and that involves separating your feelings from those of someone else. It also involves knowing what is helpful or unhelpful when difficult emotions arise for you. The next is sexual boundaries, and this has to do with your expectations around physical intimacy. Remember that healthy sexual boundaries always include consent. If someone is violating your sexual boundaries, that means that sexual violence is occurring. Communication must take place throughout every physical act, all the way from kissing through to sexual intercourse. The next are intellectual boundaries, and they refer to your expectations around respect of your thoughts, opinions, or beliefs. This could include setting boundaries about what types of conversations you're willing to engage in. The next are financial or material boundaries, and this has to do with money and your belongings. It has to do with what you're willing or not willing to spend your money on or share with others and the rules that surround that. And lastly, are digital. It refers to your comfortability with online sharing. Discuss early on with friends, family members, and intimate partners what you're comfortable sharing online, as well as devices or account sharing. What is it that you're willing to do or not do when it comes to your online presence? So let's talk about how we communicate. Up to 90% of our communication with others is nonverbal, meaning that it has nothing to do with the words that we say, but with tone of voice, intonation, body posture, hand gestures, and eye contact. All of these are important to be mindful of when you're communicating your boundaries with other people. Say that you have a friend who comes over and just helps himself to anything in your fridge. You really wish that they would ask you before going in your fridge and cupboards. If you communicated that boundary like this, how do you think that would go? Aggressive communication endangers the relationship and closes off communication. What we want to aim for when we're communicating our boundaries is assertive communication rather than aggressive or passive. When we're using assertive communication, we're remaining respectful of other people's thoughts and opinions, but we're also clearly communicating our expectations. Assertive speakers do things like maintain good eye contact, use positive body language, use a direct and firm tone of voice, repeat their message as needed, and often use something called an I statement. I statements are a very effective assertive communication tool. They allow the listener to hear what the speaker has to say without feeling blamed or shamed. When we say something like, "You never listen," it implies blame and causes the person to react defensively and cut off further communication. Let's practice this skill. Our first situation deals with a digital boundary. A friend of yours keeps posting photos of the two of you together every time you take one, and you'd really like it to stop. Remember that a good I statement involves how you're feeling and what you would like to happen differently. So let's try. I feel uncomfortable when you post pictures of me because I'd rather those be private. I'd like you to ask me next time before posting. Our next situation deals with an intellectual boundary. A friend of yours keeps using the phrase, "that's so gay," to describe odd people or behaviors or things, and it's making you very uncomfortable. Let's try saying, "I feel upset when you use that phrase because it's hurtful to other people. I'd like you to stop using it around me." This next situation deals with a sexual boundary. You and your partner have been dating for quite some time and have been talking about taking things to the next level sexually. The next time you hang out, your partner assumes that you want to have sex based on previous conversations, but you're just not ready to move forward. Let's try saying, "I feel scared about moving so quickly because I'm just not ready yet. I'd like it if we could just slow things down a little." Remember that in a respectful and healthy relationship, your partner will respect this boundary and won't try to pressure or coerce you further. Did you know that in 2018, the Canadian Women's Foundation conducted a survey to assess people's understanding of what it means to gain sexual consent? What they found was that only 28% of Canadians fully understood what it meant to gain sexual consent. Obviously, this is very problematic. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 8 men will experience sexual violence in Canada in their lifetimes. This is why it is so important that we learn how to properly communicate our boundaries, as well as respecting the boundaries that others have implemented. So let's talk about consent. Consent is a voluntary agreement to do something. When it comes to sex, consent involves communication and enthusiasm between all people involved at every point of interaction, all the way from first kiss through to sexual intercourse. Consent involves not only verbal acknowledgement, but also physical body language. If someone says the word yes, but you can tell that they're uninterested or uncomfortable, consent has not been gained. When it comes to sexual activity, there are a few factors that may influence your ability to give consent. The first is the use of drugs or alcohol. Drugs and alcohol impair our judgment, behavior, mood, and capacity to make decisions. The second is if you are sleeping or unconscious. If you are under the age of consent. If the person that you are engaging in sexual activity with is in a position of power or authority over you, or if coercion is used. That means gaining your yes through the use of power, pressure, or force. So, what is sexual coercion? Sexual coercion is defined as the act of using pressure or force to have sexual contact with someone. It also involves the persistent attempt to engage in sexual activity with someone who is already refused. Sexual coercion is sexual violence and can involve emotional or verbal manipulation to make someone feel pressure, guilt, or shame for saying no. To make the picture a little bit clearer, I'm going to give you some examples of coercion. Emotional manipulation. "I thought you loved me." Outright threats. "If you don't sleep with me, I'm going to break up with you." Badgering. "Please, please, 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 come on, please." Over the top affection or compliments. "Oh, come on, baby, you know how you turn me on. I need sex from you." Insisting you must follow through. You told me we could. It's my birthday. Come on. And guilting. Oh, I guess you never really loved me. Now that we've talked about situations in which consent cannot be obtained, let's talk about the 5 factors that ensure that sexual consent is achieved. The first is that it is freely given, there's no coercion involved. The second is that it's reversible. Anyone can change their mind at any point. It's informed and specific. People know what they're agreeing to specifically, and it's enthusiastic. It's no, maybe, I don't know. It's yes. If you're ever feeling like there are just too many components to consent, remember this acronym. Consent is FRIES. Freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. And if you're still part of the 28% of Canadians who still don't quite understand sexual consent, take a look at this video. It should help clear things up. As promised, here's a list of community resources you can reach out to if you still feel like you need some support in this area. Thank you so much for joining me today. Remember to follow us on Instagram at WCS_VPP and follow our QR code to our Ontario Trillium Foundation survey. Feedback from this survey ensures that we keep receiving funding, as well as improving our presentations for future audiences. Thank you.